How to make an essay concise when all sentences and details are required effectively answers the question. All right. Okay, well, there's a bit of a contradiction there. If every single detail you have there is required, every sentence is required as is, then you can't make it more concise. But I know what you're asking. You're asking, I have all of this information. Currently, I've packaged it up in this particular way, and it's, say, 1,100 words. How do I make that more concise? How do I reduce the essay and still preserve all of the fundamental points that I'm making? It's a very good question, and it's a very common problem. And for any of you who are wondering why this might be such a big issue, even if you're not thinking it's an issue for you, right? It probably is because if you actually sat down and timed out a response before your assessment, you would probably realize that the draft essay that you at least first come up with is far too long relative to how much time you're actually going to be given during that exam or assessment time. Okay, so it's very important that for any of your essays, even your craft of writing, if you have an in-class exam, no matter what year you're in, by the way, if you have an in-class exam, you must always write out your draft essay before you commit anything to memory, before you decide that that's the essay you're going to take into your exam. Because you need to know that you can write that essay out in far less time than is allocated to you on the day of the exam. Because you need to have a buffer time. You need to have extra time to adapt to the new question that you receive. And you just need to have that time anyway as a contingency, right? Worst case scenario, say it takes you a while to get warmed up in there. Say you're writing a bit slower than you normally do. You want to have that buffer time. So if you are being given 40 minutes to write an exam, make sure you can write your draft out in 32 minutes. Which brings us to this question. You want to be able to say your point, communicate your point, your analysis in as fewer words as possible. You want to be able to say the same thing in as fewer words. Okay, so long tangent to set up the answer here. How do you actually make an essay more concise? Okay, well, let's look at it from a macro perspective and then we'll zoom in on it. Okay, so from a macro perspective, consider the amount of paragraphs you have. Okay, consider whether all of those are necessary. For a typical essay, you want at least 3 body paragraphs as a minimum. There are some exceptions, but introduction, 3 body paragraphs, conclusion is your standard essay structure. Okay, there are some exceptions. For instance, I know that some people are doing ALD or English studies. Sometimes you get less time in the exam, only 30 minutes. There may be reasons why you only have 2 body paragraphs for an essay. But for anyone doing English Standard, Advanced, or even Year 11 Standard Advanced, or in other years, if you're basically given an essay on one text, then I would go for 3 body paragraphs. Okay, so 3 body paragraphs is our standard structure. Now, if we're looking at those structures, the first thing I'll do is I'll look at how long each paragraph is, and we want to see where we can cut them down. So make sure that you get a word count for each paragraph. Okay, get a word count for each paragraph, put it in brackets, and then we can see where the cuts need to be made. All right, the first thing I'm going to look to cut before I really get into the meat of the essay is I'm going to look at the conclusion. Your conclusions need only be 2 sentences. I've even gotten away with 1-sentence conclusions before and received full marks. Lots of students have. A good 1-sentence conclusion with a very good essay before it, body paragraphs introduction, can still get full marks. But you must have a conclusion. If you run out of time and don't get the conclusion done, you can't get full marks. You probably can't even get 19 out of 20. You're looking at 18 max. You need to complete the essay. Okay, that's a structure requirement. But while it's a structure requirement, you don't need to be excessive on the conclusion. You need to understand that that's the least important paragraph in an essay. Some students are doing 4 or 5-sentence conclusions. That's crazy. Spend all your time on the body of the essay and on nailing the introduction, on nailing the thesis.